The first sign that the human fleet was arriving was not visual or auditory. It was a feeling that swept through every living being on Nexus Prime Station like a cold wave. The air itself seemed to become heavier, charged with an energy that made everyone's skin crawl. Speaker Veltar was in his private chambers when it happened. He felt his tentacles start to tingle and a strange pressure built up behind his eyes. For a moment he thought he might be having a medical emergency. Then the station's communication system activated. All personnel, this is Station Command. Please report to observation decks immediately. The Terran Federation fleet is arriving. Veltar made his way to the main observation deck along with hundreds of other beings from dozens of species. They crowded against the massive transparent aluminum windows, looking out into space with a mixture of curiosity and dread. At first, they saw nothing unusual. The starfield looked exactly as it always had. Then, without warning, space began to change. It started as tiny distortions in the light from distant stars. The light seemed to bend and twist, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Then the distortions grew larger, spreading across the entire visible area of space around the station. Reality displacement detected, announced the station's computer system in its calm, mechanical voice. Multiple hyperspace emergence points identified. Warning: vessel count exceeds sensor capabilities. The first human ship materialized out of the twisted space like a mountain emerging from fog. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest galactic dreadnought. Its hull was a deep gray color that seemed to absorb light, and it moved with the slow, inevitable motion of a natural disaster. Then the second ship appeared, and the third, and the fourth. Within 5 minutes, over 200 human vessels hung in space around Nexus Prime Station. They arranged themselves in a perfect geometric formation that demonstrated mathematical precision beyond anything the galactic civilizations had ever achieved. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They had clean, flowing lines that suggested both elegance and deadly purpose. There were no unnecessary decorations, no bright colors, no proud emblems. They looked like they had been designed by beings who considered warfare to be a science rather than an art. By the ancient gods, whispered Admiral Thoss, who had joined the crowd on the observation deck. They are magnificent. But what truly frightened the observers was not the ships themselves. It was how they moved. The entire fleet operated like a single organism. Every ship maintained perfect position relative to every other ship. When they needed to adjust their formation, they did so with synchronized precision that would have been impossible for any other military force. How do they coordinate so perfectly? Asked Counselor Vash. His blue skin turned almost white with fear. There must be thousands of individual captains making decisions. Maybe that is the point, replied Quindal quietly. Maybe they do not make individual decisions at all. The station's communication system activated again, and a new human voice filled the air. It was different from the Special Operations Team's voices. This voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had never doubted their own competence. Nexus Prime Station. This is Admiral Choi Minho of the Terran Federation, Battle Group 7. Requesting permission to establish Operational Command Center aboard your facility. Speaker Veltar activated, his personal communicator with shaking tentacles. Permission granted, Admiral. Welcome to Nexus Prime. Thank you, Speaker. I will be aboard your station in 10 minutes. Please prepare a secure briefing room and have all relevant tactical data ready for review. 10 minutes later, Admiral Choi materialized in the station's main transport bay. Unlike the Special Operations Team, he had not appeared mysteriously or used any exotic technology. He had simply used the regular transport system like a normal person. But there was nothing normal about the way he moved or the way others reacted to his presence. Choi was a man of average height and build, wearing a simple gray uniform with minimal decorations. He looked like he could have been anyone's neighbor or co-worker. But when he walked through the station's corridors, everyone stepped aside without being asked. It was not fear exactly. It was recognition. Every being who saw him understood, instinctively, that they were in the presence of someone who could end their existence with a casual thought. The briefing session was held in the station's largest conference room. The council members sat on one side of the table, trying to look calm and professional. Admiral Choi sat alone on the other side, reviewing data on a small handheld device. I have read the reports from Special Operations Team Alpha, he said without looking up from his device. 4 soldiers eliminated the Devourer presence in 1 star system. Acceptable results for a reconnaissance mission. Reconnaissance? Repeated Admiral Thoss, his ears flattening against his head. They destroyed an entire invasion force. Admiral Choi finally looked up from his device and his eyes were completely calm and emotionless. The Kepler 442 system contained approximately 12,000 Devourer units. Our intelligence estimates suggest the total Devourer force numbers in the millions. The Special Operations Team conducted a limited engagement to assess enemy capabilities. The casual way he discussed the complete destruction of a threat that had terrified the galaxy sent chills through every council member. We have now deployed 2 Army divisions and supporting naval elements, Choi continued. Total personnel, 53,000 troops, 1,500 pilots, and 8,000 support staff. This should be sufficient to eliminate the remaining Devourer presence in this sector. Sufficient, whispered Counselor Vash. You are talking about fighting millions of adaptive machines with just 50,000 soldiers. Correct, replied Admiral Choi, as if explaining something obvious to a child. Our force projections indicate a 96% probability of complete mission success within 30 days. Acceptable casualty estimates are below 2% of deployed personnel. The silence that followed was broken by a soft chiming sound from Admiral Choi's device. He glanced at it and nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Our forward elements have already begun operations in the Vega sector. Initial contact with Devourer forces occurred 17 minutes ago. Enemy resistance is within expected parameters. 17 minutes ago, Admiral Thoss checked his own communications equipment. We have received no reports of any engagement. That is correct, said Admiral Choi. Operations are proceeding according to plan. There is no need for reports until significant developments occur. Speaker Veltar felt a horrible realization creeping over him. Admiral, when you say your forward elements have made contact with the enemy, what exactly do you mean? 3rd Battalion of the 47th Infantry Regiment encountered a Devourer patrol force of approximately 800 units. Standard engagement protocols were initiated. And the result? Enemy force was eliminated within 4 minutes. Our casualties were 0. The words hit the council members like physical blows. A single human battalion had destroyed 800 Devourers in 4 minutes without losing anyone. The same Devourers that had crushed their combined fleets were being wiped out by regular human soldiers, like they were minor obstacles. Over the next few hours, similar reports came in with mechanical regularity. Human forces were encountering Devourer units throughout the affected sectors, and every engagement ended the same way. Complete enemy destruction, minimal or 0 human casualties. How is this possible? Asked Quindel, his bird-like features pale with shock. The Devourers are adaptive. They learn from every attack. How do your forces prevent them from adapting? Admiral Choi activated a holographic display that showed the current tactical situation. Red dots represented Devourer forces. Blue dots represented human units. As they watched, red dots were disappearing from the map at a steady rate. Adaptation requires time to process new information, he explained. Our engagement protocols are designed to eliminate enemy forces before adaptation can occur. Average engagement duration is between 3 and 7 minutes. But that is exactly what we tried to do, protested Admiral Thoss. We used overwhelming force to destroy them quickly. It did not work. Your definition of overwhelming force was insufficient, Admiral Choi replied matter-of-factly. You deployed the maximum firepower your civilizations could generate. We deploy the minimum firepower necessary to guarantee success. The distinction was subtle but terrifying. The galactic civilizations had used their absolute maximum effort and failed. The humans were using what they considered barely adequate force and succeeding completely. Admiral, asked Speaker Veltar carefully, what would you consider to be overwhelming force? For the first time since he had arrived, Admiral Choi smiled slightly. It was not a cruel smile or a threatening one. It was the smile of someone who found a question mildly amusing. The current deployment represents approximately 0.3% of total Terran Federation military capability, he said. If we considered this threat to require overwhelming force, we would have deployed our entire Third Fleet. That would be roughly 4 million personnel and 12,000 vessels. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in their long history. Representatives from 43 species sat around the chamber, but for the first time nobody was speaking. They all stared at the holographic display that showed the empty space where the Kepler 442 system had been under devourer control just hours before. The silence stretched on until Speaker Veltar could not stand it anymore. His tentacles were shaking so badly that he had to wrap them around his chair to keep them still. "We need answers," he said finally. "We need to understand what we just witnessed." Admiral Thos activated his personal communicator. "Special Operations Team Alpha, this is Fleet Command. We request immediate debriefing session. The Council has questions about your operational methods." The reply came back within seconds, but it was not what they expected. "Acknowledged, Fleet Command. Team Alpha returning to station for debriefing. Warning. Team members may exhibit behavior consistent with post-combat stress. Please maintain appropriate safety protocols during meeting." "Safety protocols?" repeated Quindal nervously. "What kind of safety protocols?" "Unknown, sir," replied Admiral Thos. "But given what we have seen, I suggest we take their warning seriously." 20 minutes later, the 4 humans materialized in the council chamber just as they had before, but this time something was different. Their movements were more fluid, almost predatory. Their eyes had a strange brightness that had not been there earlier. Commander Dongwu stepped forward, and several council members instinctively moved back in their chairs. There was something in his expression that made every survival instinct they possessed scream warnings. "Debriefing as requested," he said, his voice perfectly calm. "Devourer threat in Kepler 442 system has been eliminated. Estimated enemy casualties 94% of local forces destroyed, 6% disabled permanently." "How?" asked Veltar, struggling to keep his voice steady. "How did 4 individuals succeed where our combined fleets failed?" Hannah stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice had an odd quality that made everyone in the chamber uncomfortable. "We used methods that your military forces cannot employ. Methods that require specific psychological and physical modifications." "What kind of modifications?" demanded Counselor Vash. The 4 humans exchanged glances. Then Sojin began to explain, and with each word she spoke, the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. "My neural interface systems required 7 major surgeries to install. The process killed 847 test subjects before the procedure was perfected. My brainstem has been replaced with hybrid organic synthetic components that allow me to connect directly with any technology, regardless of origin." She paused and turned her head slightly. The movement was too fluid, too precise. It looked wrong, like a machine trying to imitate human behavior. "The modifications cause constant pain. The synthetic components reject biological tissue on a continuous basis. I require specialized drugs every 6 hours to prevent my own immune system from killing me." Several council members made sounds of horror and disbelief, but Sojin was not finished. "The neural pathways created by the interface cannot be turned off. I experience the thoughts and memories of every artificial intelligence I have ever connected with. This includes the Devourer collective consciousness. Their memories of consuming entire civilizations are now part of my permanent mental structure." Jamin spoke next, his voice flat and emotionless. "My combat enhancement package includes synthetic adrenaline compounds, modified muscle tissue, and altered brain chemistry. The modifications allow me to process tactical information at superhuman speeds and maintain combat effectiveness for extended periods without rest." He held up his hand, and the council members could see that his skin had an odd, waxy appearance. "The enhancement drugs are highly toxic. They cause severe damage to internal organs and nervous system tissue. Most subjects die within 2 years of initial treatment. Those who survive require replacement organs and extensive medical support to continue functioning." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual background noise of the station's life support system seemed muted. "The combat chemicals also affect psychological state," Jamin continued. "Extended use results in increased aggression, reduced empathy, and difficulty forming social connections. Most enhanced soldiers are considered too dangerous for normal social interaction." Hannah spoke again, and this time her voice carried accents from a dozen different species. She was switching between languages without seeming to realize it. "My linguistic modifications required direct alteration of brain structure. The language processing centers of my mind have been expanded and enhanced using experimental techniques. The process causes permanent damage to memory formation and emotional regulation." She looked directly at Counselor Vash, and he flinched at the intensity of her stare. "I can speak and understand over 4,000 languages. including mathematical and computer programming languages. But I can no longer form long-term personal memories. I do not remember my family, my childhood, or my life before the modifications. I exist only as a functional tool for communication and cultural analysis. Commander Dongwu stepped forward, and every being in the chamber felt an overwhelming urge to run away. There was something about his presence that triggered every predator detection instinct they possessed. "My enhancements are the most extensive," he said quietly. "I volunteer for missions with projected survival rates below 3%. This is because my psychological modifications make normal life impossible." He paused, and for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. "The military classifies soldiers like me as acceptable losses. We are kept in isolation between missions because we pose a threat to normal personnel. We do not retire. We do not return to civilian life. We continue on missions until we die, because the alternative is worse." The silence that followed was broken by a small whimpering sound from Ambassador Krex. The reptilian had pressed himself against the back of his chair and was making unconscious, clicking sounds of distress. "But why?" asked Veltar, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do this to yourselves? Why create such modifications?" Dongwu's expression became completely emotionless. "Because sometimes the survival of civilization requires monsters. We volunteer to become those monsters so that normal humans do not have to." "You volunteer?" repeated Admiral Thos in shock. "Death row prisoners, mentally unstable individuals, and volunteers with terminal illnesses," explained Hana matter-of-factly. "The modification process has a 97% fatality rate. Only those with nothing to lose are accepted into the program." So Jin tilted her head with that disturbing mechanical precision. "We are not heroes. We are weapons that human civilization creates when facing extinction-level threats. We are kept in containment between deployments because we are too dangerous for normal society." The full horror of what they were hearing finally hit the council members. These four beings, these impossibly competent soldiers who had just saved their civilization, were not the elite of human society. They were the outcasts, the damaged, the expendable. "If these are your monsters," whispered Quindal, his bird-like features pale with terror, "what does that make your regular soldiers?" Commander Dongwu smiled, and the expression was absolutely terrifying. It was the smile of a predator that had found something amusing about its prey. "Professionals," he said simply. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The council members began to understand the true scope of what they had unleashed. These four damaged, dangerous beings were not representatives of human military power. They were disposable tools, sent ahead to test the threat level. Behind them, approaching through hyperspace, were the real human forces. Soldiers who were so competent, so well-trained, and so effective that they made these enhanced monsters seem reasonable by comparison. "The regular fleet will arrive in 14 hours, Dongwu continued, his voice perfectly calm. "I recommend you evacuate all personnel from the affected sectors. Our operational methods are considered extreme even by human standards." "How many ships?" asked Admiral Thos, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. 200 vessels. 50,000 regular troops." The numbers were not particularly large by galactic standards, but after seeing what four humans could accomplish, the thought of 50,000 normal human soldiers was more terrifying than any devourer swarm. Speaker Veltar looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow council members. They had called for help from humanity, and humanity had answered. But the cure might be worse than the disease they had been fighting. "What have we done?" he whispered. None of the humans answered. They simply stood there, waiting, like weapons that had completed their function and were ready to be put away until they were needed again. Outside the station, space began to twist and bend as the first human warships prepared to arrive. The argument in the council chamber had been going on for 2 hours. Speaker Veltar watched as his fellow council members shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. Some wanted to stop the humans from deploying. Others insisted they should send backup forces. A few suggested they evacuate the entire sector and let the humans handle everything alone. "We cannot let four beings, no matter how advanced, face the devourers by themselves," Admiral Thos was saying, his voice getting louder with each word. "It is madness. The devourers have consumed entire fleets. What can four individuals do that 2,000 ships could not?" "Maybe that is exactly the point," replied Councillor Vash quietly. "Maybe large fleets are the wrong approach. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communication system activated itself without warning. Commander Dongwu's voice filled the room, calm and professional as always. Council leadership, this is Special Operations Team Alpha. We are departing for the Kepler 442 system immediately. Please maintain your fleet at a minimum distance of 50 light minutes from the operational zone. 50 light minutes? Sputtered Quindel. That is far beyond sensor range. How will we monitor the situation? You will receive regular updates, came Hana's voice over the comm. Do not attempt to enter the operational zone under any circumstances. Regular forces will arrive in 18 hours. Area must be clear by then. The transmission ended before anyone could ask more questions. Admiral Thoss immediately activated the fleet communication network. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Take positions at 50 light minutes from Kepler 442 system. Monitor all long-range sensors. Do not approach closer without direct authorization. The next few hours passed slowly. The combined galactic fleet, representing the military might of 43 civilizations, sat in space and waited. Long-range sensors could barely detect anything happening in the distant star system. Occasionally there would be a brief energy spike or an unusual gravitational reading. But nothing that made sense. I feel like a coward, muttered Admiral Thoss, pacing back and forth on the bridge of his flagship. 4 humans are fighting for our survival, and we are hiding behind them like children. Sir, called out his sensor operator, a young canine with excellent hearing. I am detecting unusual transmissions from the Kepler system. They are not using any communication protocols I recognize. Put it on speakers. The bridge filled with strange sounds. It was not quite music, not quite speech, and not quite mathematics. The patterns were complex and beautiful, but also somehow unsettling. Several crew members reported feeling dizzy when they listened to it for too long. What is that? Asked the Admiral. Unknown, sir. But it appears to be directed at the Devourer swarm. Meanwhile, 50 light minutes away, the 4 humans were conducting warfare in a way that no galactic civilization had ever imagined. They had not engaged the Devourer swarm directly. Instead, their small transport pod had slipped past the mechanical beings like a ghost, landing on one of the consumed planets. The surface was covered with Devourer technology, twisted metal structures that pulsed with alien energy. Any normal being would have died within minutes on the planet's surface. The atmosphere was poisonous, the radiation levels were lethal, and the Devourer machines would have detected and destroyed intruders immediately. But the human team moved through the mechanical landscape like they belonged there. Their armor protected them from the hostile environment, and their movements were so careful and precise that the Devourer sensors did not register them as threats. So Jin was the first to make contact with the Devourer network. She found a data junction point and began connecting her equipment to it. The cables from her armor extended and merged with the alien technology in ways that should have been impossible. Human technology and Devourer systems were completely different, built by species that had evolved millions of years apart. Connection established, she reported quietly over the team's communication channel. Beginning infiltration protocol. Her neural implants, the same ones that had killed hundreds of test subjects during development, began interfacing directly with the Devourer collective consciousness. She felt the vast artificial mind pressing against her thoughts, trying to understand what she was. But Sojin was ready for this. Her consciousness had been trained and modified to resist mental intrusion. Instead of being absorbed by the Devourer network, she began to absorb information from it. Got their central algorithms, she whispered. Jamin transmitting tactical data now. Sergeant Park Jamin was positioned on a high ridge overlooking a Devourer processing facility. His enhanced nervous system, augmented with combat chemicals that would kill most beings, allowed him to process tactical information at superhuman speeds. He received Sojin's data and immediately began calculating attack patterns. The Devourer's adaptive protocols followed logical sequences. If he could predict their adaptations, he could prepare counter-adaptations in advance. Hana, I need you to start the linguistic sequence, he said into his comm unit. Lieutenant Kim Hana was standing in what used to be a city plaza, surrounded by Devourer machines. Her modified brain, capable of processing dozens of languages simultaneously, had been analyzing the mathematical patterns that the Devourers used to communicate with each other. She had discovered something remarkable. The Devourers did not just learn from attacks against them. They also learned from communication patterns. If she could speak to them in their own mathematical language, but introduce logical contradictions and paradoxes, she could cause their learning algorithms to malfunction. Hana began to broadcast her message. It sounded like music mixed with advanced mathematics, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She was speaking in equations, using mathematical poetry to tell the devourers that they were wrong about everything they thought they knew. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the planet, devourer machines began to pause in their activities. Their collective consciousness was trying to process information that contradicted itself. The paradoxes Hana was broadcasting created feedback loops in their thinking patterns. Some devourer units started attacking each other, unable to determine which ones were following the correct protocols. Others simply shut down completely, overwhelmed by conflicting instructions. Commander Lee Dong-woo watched the chaos from his position near the planet's main spaceport. His job was the most dangerous of all. While his team created confusion and disruption, he had to penetrate the heart of the Devourer command structure. The command ship was a massive construct of organic metal that floated in the planet's upper atmosphere. It controlled all Devourer operations in the system and maintained connection with the greater swarm across the galaxy. Dong-woo's approach was simple and terrifying. He stole a small Devourer transport unit, killed its occupants, and piloted it directly to the command ship. The Devourer's own adaptive technology recognized the transport as friendly and allowed it to dock. Once inside the command ship, Dong-woo began his real work. He was not there to destroy the ship from within. He was there to reprogram it. His neural modifications allowed him to interface with technology in ways similar to So-jin, but his approach was different. Where she was subtle and careful, he was direct and brutal. He forced his way into the ship's control systems and began rewriting their basic programming. "This is Alpha Leader," he reported to his team. "Beginning final phase. All units prepare for immediate extraction." "Understood," came the replies from his team members. Dong-woo's modifications to the command ship were simple but devastating. He changed the identification codes for every Devourer unit in the system. As far as the command ship was concerned, all other Devourers were now enemies that needed to be destroyed. The effect spread through the swarm like a virus. Every Devourer unit received orders to attack every other Devourer unit. Their own adaptive technology, designed to make them unbeatable, turned against them. The explosion that followed could be seen from 50 light-minutes away. Dong-woo had piloted the reprogrammed command ship directly into the center of the main swarm. The chain reaction that followed destroyed 90% of the Devourer forces in the system within minutes. Kepler 442, "System secured," came Dong-woo's voice over the fleet. "Communication network. All team members extracted safely. Recommend immediate evacuation of monitoring forces. Regular fleet arrival in 16 hours. Area will not be safe for non-combatants after that time." Admiral Thoth stared at his sensor displays in complete disbelief. The Devourer threat that had terrified the galaxy for months, the ancient enemy that had destroyed their combined fleets, had been eliminated by 4 humans in less than 6 hours. "How?" he whispered. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "the humans are requesting immediate fleet withdrawal. They say the regular forces require a clear operational zone." "Regular forces," repeated the Admiral, his voice hollow with shock. "If 4 humans can do this, what will their army do when it arrives?" Nobody on the bridge had an answer to that question, but they all shared the same thought. Maybe they did not want to find out. The space around Nexus Prime Station suddenly twisted and bent, like someone was folding reality itself. Where empty space had been just moments before, a human ship appeared without warning. The sensor operators on the station scrambled at their controls, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The ship was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. It was not massive like their own warships. In fact, it was barely the size of a small frigate, but everything about it screamed danger. The hull was pure black, so dark that it seemed to absorb the light from nearby stars. No running lights blinked along its surface. No communication arrays were visible. It looked like a piece of empty space had been carved into the shape of a weapon. "How did it get past our sensor grid?" demanded Admiral Thoth, his wolf-like ears standing straight up in alarm. "We have detection equipment covering 100,000 kilometers in every direction. "Sir," replied the young canine technician at the sensor station, his voice shaking, "our systems show nothing. According to our instruments, there is no ship there at all." On the viewing screen, the black vessel hung motionless in space like a predator waiting to strike. It made no aggressive moves, sent no threatening messages. Somehow that made it even more terrifying. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer, a nervous reptilian named Sec. "They are requesting permission to dock and meet with the council leadership." Speaker Veltar tried to keep his tentacles from trembling as he gave the order. "Grant them docking bay 7. Send a full diplomatic escort to meet them." "Sir," Sec's voice cracked slightly, "they say they do not need an escort. They will find their own way to the council chamber." 20 minutes later, the lights in the main corridor began to flicker. The security guards posted along the route to the council chamber reported strange readings on their equipment. Some said they felt like they were being watched by invisible eyes. Others claimed the temperature dropped several degrees as something passed by. The council members were waiting in the grand chamber, trying to look calm and professional. The room was designed to impress visitors with its size and beauty. The ceiling reached up 30 meters high, decorated with crystal formations from a dozen different worlds. The table could seat representatives from over 50 species in comfort. None of that seemed to matter when the humans arrived. There was no sound of footsteps, no announcement from the guards. One moment the chamber was empty except for the council members, and the next moment 4 humans were standing in the center of the room. Several aliens jumped in their seats. Ambassador Krex made a startled clicking sound and nearly fell off his perch. Even Veltar felt his heart skip several beats. The humans had not walked through the door. They had not used the transport platform. They had simply appeared as if they had stepped out of thin air itself. "Greetings," said the human in front, his voice calm and steady. "I am Commander Li Dongwu of the Terran Special Operations Division. This is my team." He gestured to the 3 humans standing behind him. They were all wearing the same type of armor, a deep black material that seemed to move and shift like liquid metal. The armor covered them completely, but their faces were visible through transparent face shields. "Lieutenant Kim Hana, our specialist in alien languages and cultures," Dongwu continued, indicating a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the chamber. "Sergeant Park Jamin, tactical operations expert." The man he pointed to stood perfectly still, but his eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning for threats. "And Corporal Yoon So-jin, technical warfare specialist." The youngest-looking member of the team had cables running from her armor into various devices attached to her belt. Veltar tried to find his voice. "Welcome to Nexus Prime Station. We are grateful for your quick response to our request for assistance." Hana stepped forward slightly and began to speak, but instead of using the common galactic language, she switched between different alien tongues with perfect fluency. "Greetings in the name of peace. Speaker Veltar," she said in flawless tentacled speech, using the formal dialect reserved for high ceremonies. Then she turned to Admiral Thoss and continued in military canine, "We honor your courage in calling for our aid, Admiral." To Ambassador Krex, she spoke in traditional reptilian, including the respectful hissing sounds that showed proper etiquette. She continued around the chamber, greeting each species in their own language, using the correct formal phrases and cultural gestures. She knew languages that some council members thought were extinct. She spoke in dialects that were specific to individual planets. The council members sat in stunned silence. It would take most beings years of study to learn even one alien language properly. This human had mastered more languages in a few minutes than most diplomats learned in their entire careers. "How is this possible?" whispered Counselor Vash in his native tongue, forgetting that he was speaking aloud. "Years of preparation and enhanced learning techniques," Hana replied in the same language, causing the blue-skinned alien to nearly fall out of his chair. "We study your cultures extensively before deployment." Commander Dongwu activated a small device on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared above the council table. It showed detailed information about the Devourer threat, but not the same data the council had sent to Earth. "During our approach to this station, we conducted passive scans of the affected regions," he explained. "We have updated intelligence on Devourer capabilities and movement patterns." "Passive scans?" asked Quindal, his bird-like features showing confusion. "From how far away?" "Approximately 50 light-years, replied Sojin, speaking for the first time. Her voice had an odd quality, as if she was talking through some kind of electronic filter. Our sensors are quite advanced. The implications hit the council members like a physical blow. These humans had been gathering intelligence about the crisis from a distance that should have made such detailed scans impossible. Their technology was far beyond anything the Galactic Council possessed. Jamin stepped forward and began pointing to different sections of the holographic display. We have identified 17 critical weaknesses in Devourer adaptive protocols. Their learning algorithms follow predictable patterns. They can be exploited. Exploited how? Asked Admiral Thoss, leaning forward with interest. That information is classified until we assess the operational security of this station, Dongwu replied politely but firmly. We will need complete access to your military databases, communication networks, and strategic planning systems. Several council members started to object, but Veltar raised his tentacles for silence. Of course, we will provide whatever access you require. Excellent, said Dongwu. We will also need detailed information about your fleet capabilities, troop numbers, and supply lines. For planning the joint operation? Asked Quindal hopefully. The four humans exchanged glances that the aliens could not interpret. Finally, Dongwu spoke again. Actually, we will be conducting the initial operations alone. 4 team members is sufficient for reconnaissance and preliminary engagement. The chamber fell dead silent. These 4 humans, these individuals who had appeared from nowhere and demonstrated impossible abilities, were planning to face the Devourer threat by themselves. But, stammered Admiral Thoss, the Devourers destroyed our combined fleet of 2,000 ships. Surely you will need more support. Sojin tilted her head slightly, and the cables connected to her armor began to glow with soft blue light. Our analysis indicates that large fleet engagements are counterproductive against adaptive enemies. Small team operations are more effective. Besides, added Jamin with what might have been a smile, the regular forces are still loading their equipment. This is just the advanced team. The words sent a chill through every being in the chamber. These terrifying, competent, impossibly skilled humans were just the scouts. Somewhere behind them, preparing to follow, were the regular human military forces. Hana spoke again, switching back to the common galactic language. We will begin operations immediately. Please evacuate all non-essential personnel from the affected systems. Our methods can be intense. How long do you estimate the operation will take? Asked Veltar, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. Commander Dongwu checked another device on his armor. Initial phase should be completed within 72 hours. After that, we will need to clear the area for the main fleet's arrival. Clear the area? Repeated Quindal nervously. Standard protocol, explained Dongwu. The operational methods used by regular forces require significant safety margins for allied personnel. As the 4 humans prepared to leave the chamber, they simply faded from view like shadows disappearing at dawn. The council members were left alone, staring at the empty space where the most dangerous beings they had ever met had been standing just moments before. Veltar looked around at his fellow council members and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. The humans had been polite, professional, and respectful. They had also been completely terrifying. What have we done? Whispered Ambassador Krex. Nobody had an answer. The alarm bells echoed through the massive space station like the death cry of a dying star. Speaker Veltar pressed his 6 tentacles against the cold metal floor of the council chamber, trying to stop them from shaking. In his 300 years of life, he had never felt fear like this. 43 different alien species sat around the enormous circular table. Some had scales, others had fur. A few breathed different gases and sat in special tanks, but they all shared the same look of terror in their eyes. The Galactic Defense Council had faced many threats before, but nothing like this. The reports are confirmed, Military Advisor Quindal announced, his voice cracking despite his attempts to stay calm. His bird-like features were pale and his usually perfect feathers looked ruffled and dirty. The Kepler 442 system is gone. All 7 planets. 40 billion lives. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The holographic display in the center showed what used to be a thriving star system. Now it was just empty space and floating debris. The Devourers had consumed everything, leaving nothing but dust and metal scraps. That makes 3 entire species wiped out in 2 months, continued Quindal. The Harani, the Zoltecs, and now the Kimari. The Devourers are moving faster than we calculated. Our computer models show they will reach the core worlds within 6 months if we cannot stop them. Veltar watched as several council members began to panic. Ambassador Krex from the Reptilian Union was making distressed clicking sounds. The representative from the Crystal Collective was flashing angry red colors. Even the normally calm ethereal delegate was floating closer to the ceiling, a sure sign of extreme stress. "What about our combined fleet?" asked Admiral Thos, the military leader of the Canine Federation. His wolf-like ears were flat against his head. "We sent 2,000 ships to intercept them at the Vega Nebula." Quindal's expression grew even darker. "We lost 1,500 ships. The Devourers adapted to our weapons in real time. Every tactic we used, every strategy we tried, they learned from it and became stronger. The survivors report that by the end of the battle, our own weapons were useless against them." The council chamber erupted in frightened voices. Some aliens were shouting in their native languages. Others were making sounds of despair. Veltar had to use the chamber's sound dampeners to restore order. "Please, everyone, we must stay calm," he said, though his own voice was shaking. "We knew this might happen when we first discovered the Devourer ruins on the dead worlds in the Outer Rim. The ancient records warned us they were not truly destroyed, only sleeping." "Sleeping for 10,000 years, muttered Ambassador Ilex from the insectoid hives. Her compound eyes were twitching rapidly. "We thought they were just old machines. Broken technology from a dead civilization. We never imagined they could wake up and become stronger than before." Quindal activated another holographic display. It showed the terrifying reality of what they were facing. The Devourers looked like a mix of organic tissue and advanced machinery. They could change their shape, adapt to any environment, and learn from every attack used against them. Worst of all, they grew stronger by consuming other technology and life forms. "Our scientists believe they are some kind of artificial intelligence created during the Great War 10 millennia ago," Quindal explained. "They were designed to be the perfect weapon. Self-repairing, self-improving, and completely ruthless. Whoever created them lost control, and the Devourers consumed their makers along with everyone else. But something stopped them back then," pointed out Counselor Vash from the Peaceful Traders Guild. His blue skin had turned almost white with fear. "The historical records show they suddenly went dormant." "What changed?" "We do not know," admitted Quindal. "Whatever happened, it is not happening now. They are awake, they are angry, and they are heading toward the most populated areas of the galaxy. Our current military forces are completely inadequate to stop them." The reality of their situation hit the Council like a physical blow. Their combined fleets, representing the military might of 43 civilizations, had been defeated easily. Their best weapons were useless. Their smartest tacticians had been outsmarted by ancient machines. Veltar looked around the chamber at the faces of despair and realized they had only one option left. It was an option that terrified him almost as much as the Devourers themselves. "There is one possibility," he said quietly. The chamber fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. "We could ask for help from the Terran Federation." The reaction was immediate and intense. Half the council members began shouting at once. The other half sat in stunned silence. "Are you insane?" screamed Ambassador Krex. "Do you remember what happened during the border wars? Do you remember what their regular soldiers did to the pirate confederacy? They wiped out 30,000 pirates without losing a single ship," whispered Admiral Thos. "The survivors said the humans fought like demons. They said human soldiers never retreated, never surrendered, and never showed mercy to enemies. That is exactly why we made the non-interference treaty with them," added Counselor Vash. "We agreed to leave them alone in their corner of the galaxy, and they agreed not to get involved in our conflicts. Breaking that treaty could be more dangerous than the Devourers." Veltar raised his tentacles for silence. "I understand your concerns, but we are facing extinction. The Devourers will not stop with the Outer Rim. They will consume every planet, every species, every living thing in the galaxy, including Earth. The humans do not know that," pointed out Ambassador Ilex. "Their territory is far from the current invasion route. They might not realize the danger until it is too late." "Then we tell them," Veltar replied firmly. "We send them all our data about the Devourers. We explain the threat. We ask for their help." Quindal activated his personal communicator and began checking records. "According to our intelligence files, human military doctrine is very different from ours. They do not use large fleets like we do. They prefer smaller, more specialized units, elite forces trained for specific missions. Special forces, whispered Admiral Thoss, and his ears flattened even further against his head. If their regular troops are that dangerous, what must their elite soldiers be like? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Everyone in the chamber had heard stories about human warriors, tales of soldiers who could fight for days without rest, who could survive in environments that would kill most other species, who treated warfare like an art form they had perfected over thousands of years. We have no choice, Veltar said finally. I call for a vote. All in favor of requesting military assistance from the Terran Federation? One by one, tentacles, claws, and various appendages were raised around the chamber. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The motion passes, announced Veltar. May the ancient gods help us all. 3 hours later, the message was sent to Earth. It was simple and direct, as humans preferred. It contained all their data about the Devourer threat, their military analyses, and a formal request for assistance under the Emergency Cooperation Clause of the Non-Interference Treaty. The reply came back within 6 hours, faster than anyone had expected. Message received and analyzed. Special Operations Division deploying immediately. Estimated arrival time 72 hours. Prepare full briefing materials and secure docking facilities. End transmission. Veltar stared at the message for a long time. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if they had just made a terrible mistake. The humans were sending their special forces, their most elite and dangerous soldiers. If the regular human troops were frightening enough to make entire enemy fleets surrender without a fight, what kind of monsters were their special operations teams? He had a feeling they were about to find out.